Hi, everybody. It's me, Patrick, and I'm here today to talk to you about a very serious subject. It's all about plagiarism, and I'm specifically going to focus on plagiarism in Speech 1315, public speaking, because Speech 1315, the public speaking or any public speaking class, poses very unique challenges to citing information and making sure we do things the right way. So I'm going to go very briefly through this document that I've created, which will also be posted for you if you'd like to read it. And I'm going to go over basically what plagiarism is, why is it bad, the different types of plagiarism. I'm also going to discuss written plagiarism versus verbal plagiarism, my personal penalties for plagiarism. I'm going to discuss briefly the emotional reactions you might feel after discovering you have had plagiarism in your paper or your speech. And I'm going to talk about how to avoid plagiarism. I'm going to try to make this brief. So first of all, plagiarism, what is it? Why is it bad? So it's a great question. Essentially, plagiarism is taking somebody else's words or ideas and not giving proper credit for that information. There's a great resource at plagiarism.org that you can go look at, which would be wonderful for you to discover more about what plagiarism is, what it entails. But essentially, it's taking direct words or paraphrasing and either not quoting properly, not putting quotation marks around it, things like that. We're going to cover more specifically what plagiarism is later on in this video. There's also something called self-plagiarism, which I'm going to touch on briefly because it's something that is a major problem in colleges and universities. Self-plagiarism is when you take your own work that you've previously done for another class and you recycle it for a new class. You probably ask, how can this be plagiarism because it's your own work? The reason it's considered plagiarism is because when you recycle work from previous classes, you essentially are misleading your professor. The intention of all professors, pretty much all, I've never met a professor who didn't have this intention. When we give you an assignment, is we want you to do work for that assignment. We want you to do the work in that moment because it's going to reflect where you are in that moment. When you take work from a previous semester or a previous class or even earlier in the semester, you're a different person than you were when you wrote that originally. And so you're taking work you've originally done and recycling it, and you're misleading the professor by letting us think that you did that for that assignment. In addition, it's unfair to the other students in the class because they did the work and you didn't. Basically, you got a way out of it. That can be problematic on a fairness level. All right, I want to talk briefly now about accidental versus purposeful plagiarism. First of all, I want to say that in my experience, the vast majority of plagiarism that I've encountered as a teacher is accidental. What that means is the person who did it was not aware they were doing it. Sometimes it's because people are unaware of citation standards. It might be because of carelessness or lack of double checking. But no matter what the reason for the plagiarism, it's still plagiarism. The cause of the plagiarism really doesn't matter. The question is, did plagiarism occur? Yes or no? Now, some people do treat purposeful plagiarism more harshly than accidental plagiarism, and some treat it all the same. For example, here at Lone Star College, Sci-Fair, our English department doesn't distinguish between accidental and purposeful plagiarism. The penalty is the same no matter what. And that's because intent is kind of hard to prove. I fall on the side of our English department because of this. It would be really easy for a person to say, I didn't mean to do that, just to get out of a penalty or to get a lesser penalty. I want to use the analogy of speeding. Say somebody was pulled over for speeding, and all they had to do to get out of a ticket was to say, well, I didn't mean to speed. Well, we wouldn't give any tickets for speeding, but all these people are still breaking the law. Plagiarism is a law of college. If you break it, it doesn't matter whether you meant to or not. You broke it, you've got to pay the penalty. Now I'm going to go over the different types of plagiarism in Speech 1315, because there's two types of plagiarism, unlike most classes. The more traditional form of plagiarism usually occurs in our outlines that are turned in to help you guide you through your speech. There are three different ways that I've detected plagiarism in outlines. The first is having a direct quotation from a website or from an article and not putting quotation marks around that quotation. A good rule of thumb is if you have three or more exact words in a row that are copied from a source, you should put quotation marks around those. And three or more words, put quotation marks if it's exactly the same. This tells the reader of your outline where your words begin and the other person's words begin and end. So that way we can tell where it is. The second thing that happens is not putting citations next to paraphrased material. Every time we paraphrase material, we have to put a citation next to it. A good rule of thumb is every subpoint should have a citation next to it because chances are you didn't think up that information yourself. The final thing is not having a reference page or not including all your references on that reference page. It's vital that you include all references on your reference page. This allows the reader of the outline to look up your information if they wanted to themselves. Don't leave any sources off. Got to put them all on there. Now, the second type of plagiarism that is unique to Speech 1315 is that we need to cite out loud the source for the information you're giving. Every piece of information that is not your own should be cited out loud. The citation should be regularly stated throughout your speech, even if you're using the same source. Now, a good rule of thumb for this is just to say a source about every 20 to 30 seconds. That means 2 to 3 citations per minute of your speech. So that's quite a few citations, and it's something you need to get used to. Now, just to explain my penalties for my Speech 1315 public speaking classes. For my classes, I normally give a 50% penalty on that assignment for the first offense and a penalty of 100% for the second offense. So the first time you plagiarize, it's going to be half off on that assignment grade. And the second time you plagiarize, you'll get a 0. After that, you run the risk of failing the class altogether because clearly you have issues in not being able to cite things properly, and that's a major problem. Now, if the plagiarism was on an outline, there's going to be an additional penalty of a 0 on the outline. So you'll take a grade of 0 on the outline plus 50% or 100% penalty on the speech itself, depending on if it's your first or second offense. And I do want to remind you that no matter if it's intentional or unintentional, the penalty remains the same. Now, I want to talk about the emotional reactions you might feel after being accused of plagiarism. And I use accuse in air quotes for a reason. The reason for this is because an accusation makes it sound like you've committed a crime. And I know I did use a crime analogy earlier when I talked about plagiarism, but really, for most people, plagiarism isn't a crime, it's a mistake. In my experience, more than 80% of students plagiarize in one form or another on their assignments in my classes, and chances are they're doing it in all their classes. This isn't because students are inherently immoral or bad people, and it's not because they're stupid. It's because they're unaware of the issue and don't understand how to avoid it. Most people, when they hear they've committed plagiarism, react emotionally to the news. Even though almost everybody does it, we feel like we're being accused of something bad. We feel like we've done something wrong. Wrong implies morality. Unless you plagiarized on purpose with the intention of misleading somebody else, you did nothing wrong. You just made a mistake. Mistakes are learning opportunities, and if you use it as such, you're going to be awesome. Now, when learning that you plagiarized, I want you to try to reframe it as not a bad thing, but as a good thing. You're able to learn something new and improve yourself for the future. You're able to give credit to the people that helped you with your assignment. Well, that's a really wonderful thing to do. I know nobody likes the penalties associated with plagiarism. Of course, that's a minor issue compared to the bigger one of academic integrity. But I know we're all here for a grade, so if you did plagiarize on any of my assignments, I will give you the opportunity to make up those points that you lost with an alternate assignment. If you want to take advantage of that, do definitely talk to me. Now let's finally talk about avoiding plagiarism. We know it sucks. How do we avoid it? First, we can double check everything we're doing. When we copy material from the internet, we should make sure that we're either paraphrasing, when we don't need quotation marks, but we do still need a citation, or that you're putting quotation marks around quotations accurately. When reviewing your outline, you need to check to make sure every subpoint and sub-subpoint has a citation near it, if it's information that you came up with from somewhere else. Everything basically should have a citation next to it for all of our research speeches. Now, when writing your note cards for your speech, you should write your sources down on the note cards and practice saying those sources out loud when you practice saying your speech. Practice is so important, not just to make sure you know how to say your speech, but because when we say sources, it doesn't sound natural. Your brain will not want to do it. You've got to train your brain to do it. So, just to recap today, I talked about what plagiarism was, the difference between the different types of plagiarism, the types of plagiarism versus written versus verbal, my penalties, the emotional reactions you might feel, and finally, how to avoid plagiarism. That's a lot of information in less than 10 minutes. But I do want to emphasize, I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to understand plagiarism so that you can avoid it, not just for my class, but for all of your classes. Some teachers are going to take a much harder stance on plagiarism, and they're not going to be nearly as kind about it. So please, 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 no plagiarism. If you have questions, let me know.